Okay. So the first thing I thought we'd do is in the homework assignment from last PD, we were supposed to create a simple app that had a single view controller which contained 3 labels. Initially the label should be blank, but when the button is tapped, we can update each of the labels with a different text, and we can use notifications and subscriptions to implement this rather than doing it some other way. Thank you, Mia, for putting out the YouTube link. So what I thought we'll do is I'm going to just jump over into Xcode here and show you how I did this. And let's go to, so we're in the main storyboard. Basically what I did here is I created 3 labels. My labels aren't blank, but that wasn't the point of the exercise, right? And then we have a button. And essentially what should happen is when I run this, if I click the button, I see 3 different pieces of text that show up. So label 1 says it received a notification, label 2 received a notification, label 3 received a notification. So what I thought I'd do is just briefly sort of look through the code to see how I did this. It's pretty brief. And I think it's pretty easy, but we can sort of step through it. Obviously, the label stuff is all related to UIKit, so we won't cover that. The notification name, if you remember from 2 weeks ago, is the name of the notification that you're throwing. So, you know, anybody who is a listener or subscribing to a notification is going to subscribe based on the same name as what the poster is going to post to. And if you don't have the same name between the poster and the listener, they're not going to get the notification. So, and of course you can have all sorts of people posting and listening on all sorts of different names all at the same time. So in this case, I picked a name, and does anybody remember why we do these crazy reverse notations for a notification name?
That's how you, when you set up your application, it's kind of like you have to go into the general settings that's set up like that way anyway. I think that's the answer. I think, I don't know.
It's yeah, it's close. It's very similar to when you are in the, why is my stuff all blank here?
Yep, GS5. That's strange. Yours
Yeah, why is that?
isn't showing up.
Yeah, but anyway, you would have a name for your app, and you usually do it as this reverse notation of like your company name and so forth. The whole point of this is that these notification names are global across iOS itself. So for example, now it won't work between 2 different applications, but iOS itself might use notifications and they may use certain names. So this is a way to ensure that your name is really unique. It's highly unlikely that somebody else would pick that same name that somebody in as an app developer in iOS would also choose. So that's why we do that. And so what I did is I just created 3 functions: a function for label 1 listener, another function for label 2 listener, and another one for label 3. These are literally just copy and pasting the same thing, but I do change something in each of them. And so what happens here is we have a notification center.default. And does anybody remember when you do that notification center.default, what the term is for that type of object that we get back? Starts with an S.
Singleton?
Yes, singleton, that's right. So, and what does it mean to be a singleton?
It's one object that everything bridges off of. So it's one object you're sending to everything. So it's not duplicating. Am I right?
Exactly, exactly right. So down here, when we do notification.default again, we get back the exact same object that this one did. And we get back the exact same object again. It's not different ones, it's all the same. So that's the singleton. And you'll see singletons all over the place. In fact, we're going to see them soon with the location manager when we do location services. And then all I'm doing is adding an observer here. And sorry, I'm going to move my windows out of the way here so I can see what I'm doing. So we have add an observer based on the name. We don't care about any object being passed, and the queue is nil, which just means that we're going to, whatever queue the poster is on is the queue that we will run on. And by queue, we mean those like fast lane and slow lane, those types of things. And so when the notification comes in, I use the block callback because I like this better than doing the delegation version, because my code is right here with the add observer and it's not off somewhere else. And I just basically set the label text to label 1 received. And then down here, I set it to label 2 received and label 3 received. So the only way that these labels are going to get these text values is if these observers actually get a notification. So then down here in view did load, I actually call each one of these once. So I call the first function, so it basically adds itself as an observer, it subscribes, and then the second label, the second one is called, and we add ourselves as an observer in the third one. And we're done, really. At that point, we run, and then we just start listening. And then the cool part down here is when the button is tapped, the button just says, hey, notification center.default, again, the same singleton is returned, and it says post to that same name, and we give it a nil object, and that triggers each one of these. So those guys would not be there, and that text would not be there if they were not properly listening. So we tap on button, and each of them gets the signal. So do we know which one runs first?
Label 1 listener.
You might think so, but you can't rely on that. So observers, you could have 20 different observers, and what you want to remember in this is that if somebody posts and there are 20 observers out there, it is not deterministic as to who will run before the other. So you don't write your code assuming that because the add observer here was added first and this was added second and this was added third, because that's what we did right here. That does not mean that is the order that they will get called.
So is it asynchronous?
Asynchronous, exactly. So it's basically, it's a free for all. You know, the operating system will decide who gets it. You as a coder just need to understand that it could be in any order. And in this case, we didn't care, right? Because we're just going to 3 different labels, and it's happened so fast that we don't see who's hitting it first, second, and third. Okay, so that was the homework. So let's look at the outline for what we're going to do with location services. First, I want to just talk briefly about what location services are. Then we're going to go into setting up the location services. And actually, most of the work in setting up the location services is in the permissions. This is sort of in the area where it's really a pain in the keister, because you have all these different permissions that Apple has on there, and we have to kind of work through those. The next one is becoming a delegate. So once you've set up the location service, you become its delegate, and then it's basically just responding to messages from the location service. So it's very much like a notification, but it's a one-to-one relationship. Delegates are one-to-one. So you are a delegate, you subscribe to that piece of information that comes from the location service, and you have to respond to it. So what I'm going to do is go through these steps, and then we can jump into Xcode itself and do it. So steps to set up location services. So the first thing is we need to get visibility to location services, and I'll show you how we do that. The second is we need to check and handle the permissions. The third step is we want to become the location manager delegate and also set the accuracy of how accurate we want our location service to be. We want to turn on location tracking so that we can get updates as the phone moves around. And finally, we want to respond to those updates as those updates come in. So when we look at location services as a technology, so this is us, this is our phone. I put 3 different symbols out here because the phone uses 3 different technologies to determine your position. And I think it's pretty cool when you think about how this actually works. So what is the most common technology that you think is telling you where your position is? that cars are using, your phone is using. Of the three symbols here, which one do you guys think is the most common?
GPS. GPS.
Yes, GPS, and GPS is going to be one of the more accurate ones. But there's a reason, and does anybody know why we don't just rely on GPS?
Because of delay.
Exactly, because of a delay, it's slow. It can take, to lock on to at least 3 or 4 satellites to get a position, it can sometimes take over a minute to do. The other thing about GPS is its line of sight. So your phone is not picking up GPS signals inside your house. You would have to go outside, and you're just not going to get them. So how do they solve this? Well, you know, the reason your phone still knows where it is because there are other sources of information. So this one down here is a cell tower. And it turns out that our phone, even though it's not on, you know, maybe we're on Wi-Fi right now and we're not using our cellular service, it's listening to cellular towers all over the place, and it knows the position of all of those towers in the earth. And so based on the signal strength that it gets from those towers, it can triangulate where it thinks you are. The third one is Wi-Fi. And believe it or not, all of our little Wi-Fi hotspots that are out there, there is a database that has been recording all of those Wi-Fi hotspots and their locations, such that it sees the unique MAC address or ID of that Wi-Fi wireless station. And again, it knows how far away you are from that station. So if it can see a couple of them, correlate it with the cell tower, and if it gets a GPS, great. If not, it can literally use these two things, or just the Wi-Fi or just the cell tower, to actually determine or triangulate where you are. So it's very interesting, you know, for people that are building IoT devices, you can have a device that only does Wi-Fi, and it actually can be used in a way that it knows what its location is. So that's pretty cool. At least I think it's cool. The other thing is location services. I'm glad we're covering it, because the reality is that this is one of the fundamental functions of the phone. I mean, if your phone didn't tell you where you were, I think a lot of people wouldn't even buy the phone or use it. So let's start out with permissions and look at the fact that there are 2 levels associated with permissions regarding your location. The first one is global permissions. And that means that they can go into the phone and literally in settings say, I don't want location services for anything, any app, anywhere. Those are global. So that's one thing we have to check for to see if it's been turned off or on. And the second one is app permissions. So if the global permissions pass and they have them enabled, it doesn't mean that they've enabled them for your app. So your app needs to get its own permissions as well. And by the way, when you get these, checking for these permissions doesn't mean that you're just going to be a good actor and say, oh, well, if they didn't permit it, I'm not going to give them location services. You literally will be prevented from getting them. So the app is not going to be able to get them if these permissions aren't granted. And the app permissions to do this also require us to modify the Info.plist with a string, which we'll see in a second, that is part of the message we send the user when we try to get those permissions. And I think, Joan, this is where you kind of ran into some difficulty before, because the Info.plist is a little bit hard to work with. And so we're going to do that in our coding here. So how do we gain visibility to location services? So this is a view controller. So this is your very, run-of-the-mill thing that you start with every project. And I'm going to import core location. So that's how we actually, nothing is going to work unless you import core location. Once you do that, you've got visibility to a ton of things that you can use. And what we're going to do is create a location manager that is an instance of CL location manager. So CL is abbreviation for core location manager. This is a singleton. Again, even so I get my location manager here, but if I were to create a location manager in 4 other places in my app, I'm going to get the same location manager back. And it's these 2 things that you need to do to gain visibility to the service. And I wanted to just show, this is how you turn, so when we look at permissions, this is how you turn location services on or off globally. So over in settings on their phone, there's the privacy section. And then in location services, here's the button to turn it on or off. So again, in class, and this is very easy to run into it, if somebody has a phone or is using, has it such where this has been turned off, the exercises aren't going to work. And so this is the place to kind of look to see if you're in one of those situations. So this is something that we need to have on for this all to work. Now, location services that are available globally, you can check to see if they're enabled with the following statement. If I say if CL location manager dot location services enabled, if that's true, then I can go ahead and set up my location manager and do all the things I want to do. If that's not true, then it's up to me to notify the user with an alert and say, hey, the location services aren't turned on and you need to turn them on to use the app. And again, this is, I'll just ask, whoops. So CL Location Manager is a class. It's not an instance of a class. It's not an object. And then Location Services Enabled is actually a method on the class. Does anybody remember or know what type of method this is referring to or what it's called? So methods on classes themselves are called static methods. This method doesn't change and doesn't require you to create an object like creating the location manager. It's literally right on the class itself. So it's considered a static method. And so you just say, if CL location manager.location services is enabled, then you just move on. So that's your first check that you have to do. Then the second one is you need to check for app authorization. And this one is the one where it's a little more involved because there are 5 different permissions that you could possibly get. So the first one is in use, which means that we're only going to allow location services to be tracked on my phone when I'm actually using the app. When I close the app or I leave the app, I put it in background, I go to my mail or something like that, it's going to stop tracking my location. When I go back into the app, it'll start again. So that's what in use is. Always permission, if I give it always, that means that even when the app is in background or I'm doing other things with other apps, it's tracking my location. So this is a much more liberal permission, but a lot of people don't want to give that permission because it's saying, hey, you could track me all the time. Even if I'm not using the app, it's tracking me. So that's the always versus in use, which is only when your app is running. Now, not determined is interesting because it's the one that you will get initially before they've given you permission. So when your app first runs, if you haven't asked for permission, you are going to be in the not determined state. The fourth one, called restricted, is really for, we won't cover it much here other than to say, for example, if you have child, what's the term I'm looking for? If you have the phone locked down so that a kid only has certain permissions to do certain things, so parental restrictions, that's what I was looking for. If there's parental restrictions on the phone, it may be the case that the parent has disabled the ability for them to even answer this question and to enable services. And so that's the restricted case. And then the denied case is the one where you've asked them and they've said, nope, you don't get location service capability and you are denied. And so the denied case means that you can't perform whatever functions you need to perform in the app if it needs location services. So those are the 5 that you have to deal with. So if we think about how we would do a statement to check for all 5 of those things, can you think of a single Swift construct that would check for all 5 of those cases?
Swift concept.
I'm sorry?
Switch statement.
Yep, exactly. So that would be, you can do it through a bunch of if then else's, but this would be the preferred way to do it. So again, you have a switch off the CL location manager dot authorization status. That's what you're going to call. And this is going to return one of these 5 cases. So either authorized when in use, authorized always, not determined, restricted, and denied. And these are where you're going to put different pieces of code depending on what has come back. So the first one that you're going to want to deal with is the not determined case. So in this scenario, we have our switch statement, and then what we want to do is we want to, we've determined that, okay, we haven't asked them a question yet. We haven't asked them, and we haven't asked to get permission. So right here in the not determined case, we're going to talk to our location manager, which we've already created, and we're going to say, hey, request when in use authorization. So requesting when in use authorization means I'm not asking for always. I'm not asking to get your location when you're not using the app. I'm only asking for it when the app is in use. And this is a built-in alert that is built into iOS. So all you have to do is call it and away you go. It will pop up the alert and it will grant the permission or not, depending on what they've done. But this is the one that requires the Info.plist. So the Info.plist is where you get to put your own explanation of why you want their permission to do this. So in the Info.plist file, the Info.plist is just a dictionary of key value pairs. So in this case, the key is privacy, location, when in use, usage description, which is a long one, and then your message right here. So this message should be a message that is convincing to the user that, yes, I want to grant location privileges. You know, I want you to be able to do this. And the less convincing you are, well, the more often or not people may just say, no, I'm not giving you permission. And then you lose that functionality in your app. So that's permissions. So now we've gotten through the permission piece. Now let's look at getting location data itself. So if we remember back in the delegation discussion, what happens is you have some object out here that needs a delegate to talk to, somebody that it's going to send messages to or ask questions of so that it can perform the functions that it needs to. So your code, whatever you're writing here, is the delegate. And the delegate gets assigned to be the delegate for the location manager. So again, the location manager wants to talk through this callback to your code. Every time a location changes, every time a heading changes, you'll see when you look at the delegation protocol of all the different functions you can implement, it's quite a bit. So there's a lot of things that this location manager would like to tell you about. And it'll tell you about it when these events actually happen. So in your code, you're going to create a function that the delegate or the location manager is going to call for you whenever a certain event occurs. So how do we do that? Well, to become a delegate, the first thing we need to do is we want to say that we're conforming to the delegate protocol, which means that all of these functions that this is defining, we're going to implement if they're required. If they're not required, we can implement just the ones we want to know about. And so this is the protocol. What is this here? Do you guys remember if I say view controller colon and then I have another class here, what does this represent?
UIV, the UI view controller delegate, the protocol.
Close. So this actually is inheritance. This is
yeah.
why I asked the question. This view controller is inheriting from UI view controller. And it is not inheriting from CL manager delegate. It's actually saying I'm going to conform to this as I'm going to conform to the protocol and be the delegate for this location manager. So the standard in Swift, although it's not enforced by the language, but the standard as far as iOS is concerned is anytime there's a protocol here, you will see delegate at the end of it. When you don't see delegate, it's most likely this is a class and this is inheritance. So this is where view controller is inheriting all the capability from UI view controller. And it's saying the view controller is conforming to the protocol of the location manager delegate. And it turns out, so in Swift, some other languages you can inherit from multiple classes at once. In Swift, you can only ever inherit from one class. That's what this is doing. You can, however, conform to as many different protocols as you want. So you could have another comma here and another one and a comma and another one, and you could do as many as you needed. So the next thing we want to do is if we're saying that we're going to conform to the delegate, we want to assign ourselves as the delegate. So if we look at the location manager, here's the location manager object that's been created. It has an attribute called delegate, which is normally nil. But when we assign it to self, that is how we're sort of, it's like plugging a plug into the wall. We have now said we are the delegate for this location manager. That assignment has been made, and now the location manager knows who to call when information changes. And then the other one has nothing to do with delegation. It's just it also has an attribute called desired accuracy. And we can, turns out that iOS already provides a constant for this called K for constant, and then core location, location accuracy best. So it's like an enumerated type, and we're saying we want the best accuracy that we can get. So this will be your way of sort of attaching yourself to location services as you're going to conform to the protocol. You're going to set this. And by the way, even if you go back to delegation, this is the thing that a lot of people forget. They forget to do this line and they wonder why nothing happens. So nothing is being called, nothing, whenever somebody says, hey, nothing's happening, the first thing I do is go look to see if they assign the delegate. Usually they haven't. And what's interesting about this is core location manager, when it wants to make these calls, if there's no delegate, it's just not going to make them. And it's fine with that. It'll keep running and tracking location, but it doesn't have anybody to talk to. It doesn't have anybody to tell what's going on. And so it just will skip that step. Then the thing that you need to do in your code is you want to respond to these delegate callbacks. And the main one that you want to do is this one, which is location manager did update location. So this is a callback that's made by the location manager, and it's going to call this function. It's going to call this function every time a location is updated. Now, it's passing locations. What is this construct right here when it has a bracket around CL location? What does that mean?
An array.
Exactly. So it's an array of locations. So what's interesting is as locations are getting updated and it's telling you about it, it's putting them into an array. So you have this array that keeps growing of locations over time. And you could use that array to like draw a whole path on a map or do whatever. Now, in our case, we only care about the latest location. And so we're going to take locations.last, the last element of the array, and that's what we'll work with. And then what should we do here? You know, in our case, because we're going to put a dot on a map and have it move based on where we are, we're going to do some map manipulation here because we've gotten a new location. When you plug this into your ISS app, you're probably going to do something different here and call the API to find out where the ISS is based on this location that you got from that. But this is where you decide what you want to do based on getting this information back. Okay, any questions so far?
Hey, just a side joke. Are you going to teach us how to make a contact tracing app?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good one. No, actually, That would be an interesting one to do. There is an API out for it, but
Really? Where?
it's in the current version of iOS. There's an API for contact tracing. So
Whoa! Oh, cool. 13.
Yeah.
Thank
people,
you.
Yeah, so people can write. I think it was in 13.5. It's in this latest stuff that's come out. So, but I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Okay, quick question, Kevin. I'm gonna let you
You
go
bet.
into the code. For the storing of locations, if every time you call that function and it stores the location in the array of previously
Yep.
of what, oh yeah, okay, thanks. Is that storage that will be on, like, is that storage that the developer will have to purchase themselves, or is that storage that can be kept elsewhere? I guess, like, whose storage does that occupy?
Yeah.
I'm assuming, like, after a long period of time. Yeah.
Sure, good question. So it's basically just using memory. It's using RAM. And if you were to turn your phone on, it's not persisting anywhere. So it's not persisting in the cloud. It's not persisting in, you know, your local data storage on your phone. It's literally in memory. It's no different than a variable, you know, foo equals 5. You know, it uses up some memory. And in this case, this array keeps building. Now, I haven't looked it up. This would be an exercise for the students to kind of check is there a limit to the size of the array? You know, because if you ran your app for 4 days and you kept moving around a lot, you know, the array is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So at some point, you would think it would start throwing stuff away. Okay.
Thank you. Really helpful. That's cool.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's pop over to our app that we're going to run here. And so basically what I have right now is just a map, and it doesn't show a location or anything yet. We're going to start out and do some of these things that we just talked about. So I'm going to import core location, and I'm going to create my location manager. So equals CL location manager. And now I have done really step 1, which is getting our core location imported and then actually creating the instance of the singleton. So I've got location manager here. Then the next thing we want to do is we want to say that we're going to conform to the protocol for getting messages. And so we do that by adding this comma, and then we can say CL location manager delegate. So we're saying we're going to conform to this delegate. And the interesting thing here is if I compile this, I get a build succeeded. And the reason is because this CL location manager delegate, all of the calls backs that it's making and wants to do are all optional. So you don't have to implement any of them. However, that's not true. For example, when you guys do table view controllers and you do a table view delegate, cell for row at index path has to be implemented. So as soon as you put this in there for that, if you haven't implemented the function callback, you're going to start throwing errors saying, hey, you haven't done that yet. Hey, you haven't implemented it. And then usually Xcode will also say, would you like me to put in a stub for you? So, which I suggest that you do that. So we have location manager delegate, and then down here, we're going to do 2 things. So what was the thing that I said that almost everybody forgets and it causes it to run and nothing to happen?
Relegate the delegate to self.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to do location manager dot delegate equals self. And again, we'll see that compiles. Now notice if I take this out, if I say I'm not going to conform to this protocol, look what happens here. It says it cannot assign a value of type view controller to this. Location manager dot delegate, I can't make myself the delegate if I haven't promised to comply to the protocol. That's what this is up here. So 2 of them go together. And then the other one was we just wanted to set the accuracy. which was desired accuracy equals, and we're good to go. So that sort of starts this out. By the way, if you notice they do this small k in front of the name, I really like that as a convention. It means it's a constant. So when I read it, I can see that it's a constant. And I think that's good form. Again, it's not required by the language. So the first thing I want to do is start doing the permission checking. And so one of the things we have to do is check for whether location services are available or not. So I'm going to just create a function, check for location services. And what we're going to do is say if CL location manager, so that's the class dot location services enabled. If that's true, we're going to do our next step, but we're not going to do it yet. Else, if it's not true, we should put up an alert letting user know they need to enable services. So this function is going to be the function that we're going to want to run to see if location services are working or not. So to call this function, where would we want to call it?
In the view did load.
Yep. So we can do it in view did load. What about, is there another one that might also be useful?
View did appear.
Yeah. So the thing you want to be careful about in view did load is that the view has not appeared yet. Is that, so there's that whole life cycle. So like this is very safe because we're not doing anything with the UI here. But this, if this is going to run and then actually start putting up an alert or doing something like that, I might want to really have this be under view did load. So let's just do, or view will appear. So, or view did appear. I could even do it even at that point, right? Super view did appear. What's the right thing to put here for this parameter?
True.
Wrong.
False.
Wrong again.
Wow. What is it then?
Animated.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's why I asked, because I see coders do this all the time. You want to pass whatever is being passed. You don't want to change the logic. So when you call super, you want to actually do the pass the parameter from what is being passed in. So if they've called this with true or false, then that's what you would do. So Marvin, I just, trapped you in that one.
No big deal. Thanks.
So that's right. So here we're going to do check for location services, and we'll run into one of these two cases. So in our case, the simulator, we're allowing the location services to occur. So we'll hit this statement right here. So now the next thing, what was the thing? So we checked for global permissions. What's the next thing we check? I said there were two levels of permissions, right? There's the global and then
The logo.
the local, the app.
Yeah,
Exactly.
the app.
The app permissions, right? So this is the permissions for your app. So what we're going to do is say check for app location services. And again, you can call these functions whatever you want. And then we're going to use the switch statement, and we're going to refer to the class location manager, and we're going to ask for authorization status, and we're going to put in the different cases. So what I'm going to do is, let me copy these so that you don't have to watch me type that. Okay, so here's the different cases for the switch statement. By the way, has anybody ever seen this before?
Heck yeah.
You've seen the default.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So unknown is kind of interesting, is it allows them, why is it giving me this error here?
Missing bracket.
Missing bracket here. That's the problem. Thank you. Okay. You go, Mia. I don't need a compiler. I've got Mia just over my shoulder watching me do this. That's great. So what we're going to do is in the not determined section here, we are going to want to put that code in to actually throw up the alert that says, hey, can we get the permissions that we want? So we can do that with our location manager, and we can say request. So we're going to not do request always down here. We're going to say request when in use authorization. And that's what we want to call so that it pops up. So right now, if I just run this, what should happen is, well, first of all, we're going to, in here in view did, this should be up here. We're going to call check for location services, and then right here, we're going to go the next level down. So we know we have the global. Now we're going to call check for application services here. So if we run this, so nothing popped up here. And I suspect the reason is that we haven't done, no, we have the Info.plist. Oh, I know why. Because the simulator, so you'll probably run into this too. Let's go ahead and stop. And I'm going to go back here. And in the simulator, I am going to erase all contents and settings, erase. So when I did this before in practice, before doing the PD now, I answered these questions, you know, I already answered the question, and so it's not going to ask me that again. So what I'm doing is resetting the simulator so that it forgets that any permissions have ever been given, so that we can sort of test that path. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and run this again. Okay, so we still did not get a pop-up, and notice down here in the list it says this app has attempted to access privacy sensitive data without a usage description. The app's Info.plist must contain this string, NS location when in use, usage description. I really wish they wouldn't do it like that, because this is the actual key value, or the key, but the keys that we're going to use are the long form, not the short form like this. And so you just have to Google it to know one from the other. But basically it's telling us we didn't update the Info.plist, and that's because I quickly just deleted what I did before. If you weren't watching, you probably saw me do it. So what we're going to do is we're in the Info.plist right here. We're going to click add. And then we're going to look for privacy. So I typed in PRIV, and let's do this. Let's widen this a little bit so we can see them. And we're going to go down, and here's all the different kinds of things you can set. Location, when in use, usage description. That's what we want. So we click there, and then over here, we put a message like, hey, this app does nothing if you don't let me track your location. Okay, so now this is supposed to be the explanation you put in that really convinces them to turn it on, right? And because you want them to have this functionality. So now if I run it, you'll see here's the iOS part, allow PD6 location services, that's the name of this app, to use your location. And then here's that plist string. So here's where I got to put in here what is actually going to be shown. So I can say allow while using the app, and that's good. So now when I run this again, nothing should pop up. And that's because if I go back to the code, the not determined case is not getting hit. What is getting hit is authorized when in use. And in fact, I could probably prove that by hitting a breakpoint here, running it. And sure enough, we just did a break on authorized when in use. So this is the happy path here. This is where we wanted to get to start doing things when things are authorized. So one of the things we want to do is we're going to, in our map, we are going to show user location equals true. So all this does is, let's take this breakpoint off. By setting this attribute on the map outlet to true, it causes this blue button to, or blue dot to show up and pulse, and that's where you are, okay? Now, the other thing we're going to want to do is create a function that allows us to center the map a little better. So right now, if we look at it, the map's the whole United States, and here we are here. So we're going to basically, I'm not going to bore you with the map kit code for this. I will spare us that and grab the code here, because it's not really, does use some location services, so we'll talk through that. But essentially what this is doing is, first it's saying the location manager dot location dot coordinate. So the location is an optional. If we do have one, then we do what's called a map kit coordinate region, which all you're doing is saying, I want it to center at a particular location, and I want my latitude and longitudinal meters of size. That's how much we're going to grow or shrink or zoom in or zoom out. I set it for 10,000 meters. And then do a map.setRegion. That will cause the map to actually do this. So down here, we can actually call this function. We can say center view on user location. And now when we run it, it zooms right in to within 10,000. So that's good. So now we've got the location there. So now let's look at how we're going to get updates to this. So right now it's just showing the current location, but we want to, as we move around, we want to have the map move. So remember, we became a delegate here, and now we have to be a delegate. We have to actually respond to a callback from the location manager when a location changes. And we can do that through did change. So if I look at location manager, let's do this. So did change, no, let's do this. Let's do it this way. It's not completing for me. So what I'm going to do is just grab it here. I want to take this out for a minute. So this is the thing that's going to get called when a location changes or gets updated for the first time. So this will get called. And so what we want to do now is we want to actually do something with it. So let's look at this code real quick, because we only have about 7 minutes left. First thing is, have you guys used guards before? So a guard is kind of neat. It's typically written on a single line. And what it's doing is it's saying, hey, guard against location.last not being set. So if we can get a location with location.last, we just continue. Otherwise, we return. So if for some reason this gets called and this array is empty, we just return. And the reason it's written on one line is, think about it like a line in the sand. You can't go past this unless this is true. The alternative way to do that would have been to put this whole thing in an if let. But then all of your code here gets indented, and it's all embedded in this if statement, which can look odd over time. So by doing a guard, you say guard let, and you do it right here on one line, and then you won't go past it if it's not true. So now we do center. Center is basically taking the core location coordinate that we got back from here. This is this is the core location coordinate 2D that we're creating, and we're creating it with latitude and longitude. And here's the location. Location is what we got here. Dot coordinate, because there's many different attributes of the location, not just the coordinate piece. So we're grabbing the coordinate piece and we're putting in latitude, and then we're putting in longitude here. That creates the center, which then can be used in the map kit make coordinate region. So we pop that in, and then we put the 10,000 and 10,000 because we want to keep that same zoom ratio, and then we set the region. And so the map should now respond to this if we change our location. So let's try it. So what I'm going to do is run it. We have a location here. Now, how do we change our location in the simulator? So we want to go to features, and this is moved around from version to version of Xcode. I'm using the latest Xcode, so if you're on the latest, this is how it'll be. If you're using earlier version, you'll just have to search it to find it. But if we go to location, I can say custom location, and now I can put in whatever I want here, and it's as though your phone just got a new location update. So I'm going to just take the 9.8 out on the end of this, and if we watch the simulator, we should see our dot move. And it did. So it just moved farther over toward the lake. So as location services start changing, you're just going to have this thing's going to get called over and over and over and over and over again every time it changes. And it won't, if you're not moving and it doesn't detect any change, it won't call it anymore. It'll only call it on a change. And when you do that, then your map will update. So when you think about ISS, if you wanted to apply it for that, you're not going to be doing a map. Here's where you might make a call to the endpoint for the International Space Station saying, when are you above me? And by the way, now you know your latitude and longitude. So now you know what to supply there. So in summary, first step, deal with the permissions. That's the real pain. You got to go through that. The other thing is that if users deny you, then you're denied. And so you have to manually sort of next time you launch and you know you're denied, say, hey, you know, you really should go enable those services and so forth. So it's really a lot easier for the user to just say yes to begin with, but it's a lot harder to kind of unwrap it if they've denied you permission. So make sure your statement is really jazzy for encouraging them to give you permission. So that's your permissions. The second step, conform to the protocol, and then implement the code when new locations are discovered. So we have 2 minutes. I want to give you homework, but any questions? Cool. So the homework assignment is using your ISS app, which had a hard-coded position, change it to use the location services so that you get your true location wherever you launch the app, and it'll tell you when the ISS is right above you. And thank you, Joan, for this homework assignment, because this is what you were trying to do.
Thank you. I love it. Now I can do it.
Now you can do it. Exactly. Cool. Well, that is all I have. It's been really a joy working with all of you and doing these PDs, and I hope that you're having fun with them. That's the main thing, is if you enjoy it and you're having fun with it, you'll really absorb it. And hopefully it'll be of help to you in the classes as you sort of build out some cool things for the students to do over some of the basic stuff. But I'm around, so just, you know, if anything pops up, you know, use Slack or email me, and we'll pick these up again in August.
Well, I learn how to do a tracing app.
Yeah. Okay. I'll leave that for August. We'll see if they still want to do tracing apps. There's so much controversy over it, and I haven't followed it all. So we'll see. Yep. Thank you, Joan. I appreciate the compliment.
Truly, I'm
Yep.
sure now a round of applause to Kevin.
Oh,
Kevin,
God,
thank you
no.
so much. This has been the greatest series. I've stayed atop my skill set. I'm a little behind, but on this last lesson. But Kevin, truly, it has been great to learn from you, and actually to see the other teachers and educators learn from you, because you've created your own micro community. And I know I'm going to be sad when you are away this summer, but definitely will be revisiting the sessions. So thank you, Kevin.
Awesome. Thank
That's all.
you.
That's all. I didn't want to hang up.
Take care.
See you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. See you later.
See you later.
Bye, Kevin.
Bye-bye, Joan. Take care.
Good luck with your summer program. That sounds really exciting.
Thank you. It's the first time I will be doing it all remotely, so gosh knows how that's going to work.
Oh, it'll probably go fine because those kids are they're so awesome with it. They'll lead the way too.
Exactly. They're very they're pretty much, you just give them something and they run with it. So it's
Yeah.
cool.
All right. Well, I'm
Alrighty.
sure they'll enjoy you as much as you'll enjoy them.
Thank you, Joan. And I look forward to seeing you in the fall.
Absolutely.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.